meeting, so.
Awesome. Ready to go.
Oh, look.
Ready?
Yep.
Call the meeting of the North Reading School Committee to order for April 1st. I thought long and hard about having a meeting on this day, but we decided to have it, so we're going ahead to have it. First on our agenda is public input. Anybody wishes to be heard on any items not on the agenda? Seeing no one? Oh, okay. Next, we'll move to our student report, and we have Josh in Torcio. Josh?
Hello, everybody. Last week we had a assembly school-wide hosted by SAD. It was on drinking and driving. We had a person come in. He talked about he lost his sister to a drunk driving accident. He showed us a video, and he also had a simulator, which simulated how slow your reactions would be if you were behind the wheel while drunk. And there was also a texting and driving simulator, which was really interesting. The juniors, seniors came in the morning, and we listened to him speak about his experience with his sister's accident, as well as we watched the video too. And then at the end of the day, the freshmen and sophomores came in, and they watched the video and listened to the man speak. It was called the Save a Life Tour, and it was brought by SAD, as I mentioned. Most of the students thought that the man had poor public speaking skills, but we thought that he had a good story, and I think a lot of people enjoyed the simulator. On Friday, we had a half day because of Good Friday, so had half-day classes. Boys Lax had a game today at 4 o'clock versus Ipswich, and on Wednesday, Girls Lax is away at Ipswich. On Friday, track had a scrimmage against multiple teams down on the track. Our third quarter has been extended to next Tuesday because of the snow days during this quarter. This Friday, we have hosted by Student Council, is a Staff Appreciation Day. There will be treats, food, flowers, and it will be nice in the teacher's caf, and they will be available all day. Next Thursday at 7 o'clock in the North Reading High School auditorium is Mr. NRHS, which is basically a male pageant show with talents and dress-ups and whatnot. It's hosted by Student Council, and tickets are available at the door. This Saturday from 7 to 10, North Reading is hosting the Knee Mask Student Council dance. Student Council members from around Northeast Mass are invited, and North Reading's hosting it, so that's a big deal. This past weekend, the baseball team went down to the Cape to play in a tournament. No word on how they did, but they went down to the Cape. Student work. This was an essay I did in my civics and government class with Mr. Osting. We spoke about the First Amendment, and we kind of talked about how the Constitution has kind of a vague definition of the First Amendment, and how the Supreme Court, with different cases, has limited and kind of broadened what it says in the First Amendment. And this was an essay I did citing cases on the First Amendment. Yeah.
That's really good.
Thank you. Any questions for Josh? Are you entering in the Mr. NRHS contest?
No, I'm going to be hosting it though. So.
Oh, that's
see
too
me on
bad.
stage.
So, do you know who any of the previous winners were?
Last year was Evan Wade. The year before that,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but defending champion is Evan Wade.
And you have your college all picked out, I understand?
Yeah, I'm going to be attending Syracuse University and studying architecture.
Great. Congratulations.
Big game this weekend.
Yep, big game
Yeah,
this weekend.
exactly. Coming up.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Okay, we're going to, due to some scheduling issues, we're going to just take one item out of order here before we get to the budget hearing. We have a brief, brief presentation from Patrick Daly and Middle School Principal Kathy O'Connell on some changes as a result of the Common Core mathematics curriculum that we are going to be implementing soon. Patrick, Kathy?
If you want to, there is up on the screen, I don't know. We will keep this brief, but we thought it was very important just to update everyone on the changes. I've spoken to you a few times in the past about some of the changes to the Common Core, so I won't go into great detail with some of this. But just a reminder that this is the Common Core is a national movement that Massachusetts signed on to. We are implementing Common Core standards currently at different grade levels. Just very quickly, these were the major points. These are the major shifts. A shift in focus. You may have heard in the past standards being a mile wide and an inch deep. We're really focusing so that there's specific outcomes for each grade level that will really build a foundation for skills as we progress through the grades. There's a focus on coherence as well, so that there's connections between topics and across grades. We're very clear in Massachusetts that we want to talk about the shift in clarity, that the standards are precisely worded and they cannot be treated as a checklist. And the final major shift is in rigor. So under this falls fluency and procedural skills, the deep conceptual understanding of mathematical concepts, and application. And it's important that these receive equal weight and that there's not just a nod to these. You know, sometimes at the end of your traditional math chapter or math lesson, you may have a real world word problem. And I bet if we asked a lot of teachers, not just in North Reading, but across the state or across the country, they'd say this is where the children have the most trouble, is in transferring those math skills to the real world. And so the point of the Common Core is to embed this and to do this with equal weight all the time in everything that we do. So some of the shifts that are happening, just to make sure everyone's clear. So the Common Core state standards and the 2011 frameworks are in place. There are going to be changing assessments. There will be new testing to this new standards. There will be new assessments, whether it's the PARC, which is a national assessment that's in development, or MCAS will remain. One of those two things is going to happen in the next couple of years. Either we're going to be going with a new assessment called PARC, or we're going to be going with an enhanced and changed MCAS. The state has not made a decision which way we're going, but it's very clear that the assessments will be changing for English and mathematics to test students on these 2011 standards. So this is why we are changing what we're teaching in our curriculum in alignment with the new standards and to prepare for the upcoming assessments. I wanted to point out that there are slight differences between grades 3 and 8 and grades 3 through 8 and grade 10. If you think about it conceptually, this is because the students who are in grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 now will be getting to grade 10 in a few years. So we're not going to change grade 10. There's going to be a little bit of a delay in that change. But this year, for this year's assessments in mathematics, in grades 3 through 8, there is what's called near full implementation of the 2011 frameworks in all schools and districts, grades 3 through 8. What that means is all of the standards that are new in 2011, that are common to both the current standards and the old standards, will be tested, and it could be tested this year. Next year, 2013-14, there's the full implementation of the 2011 standards, which means that all of the standards from the new frameworks are accessible in grades 3 through 8. The change does not happen, so next year in high school, I don't have this up there, but next year in high school there is a partial. So this year and next year is a partial. So meaning high school is still accessible this year and next year on what's common to the old and the new. And then in 2014-15, there will be the full implementation of the new 2011 math frameworks in grade 10. So just a few things that are happening at the elementary level. In 2011 and 12 and 12-13, we've been exploring the new standards, and we've been talking about using our we're continuing with our Everyday Math textbook series. Everyday Math, like many of our textbook series across the state and across the country, have come out with a Common Core alignment. So it's not necessarily a textbook that's written with the Common Core in mind, but it's a reaction to the Common Core. That's what we've been doing for these past couple of years. The Department of Ed and others have talked to us about the possibility of considering unspiraling a series like Everyday Mathematics. So these are the questions that we're considering at the elementary level as we're continuing this year and preparing for next year to utilize Everyday Math as a tool to teach Common Core standards to mastery. So there's a bit of a shift in the thinking with the Everyday Math curriculum that's been in place in this district for about 12, 13 years to what the Common Core is asking. So currently, we have these books and we're using them as a tool, but we're using the Common Core standards driving our instruction. During this summer, teachers are going to come together to coordinate curriculum, resources, and materials. And there's been a lot of activity. One of the great things about Common Core work is that we're all doing this together. This is happening in all districts across the state, and actually in many states throughout the country. And we're able to share resources in a way that we've never done before. But the SEAM Collaborative, member districts Wakefield, Bloomington, Woburn, Stoneham, Melrose, and Reading have been coming together over the summer and throughout the year to share resources, materials, curriculum guides, test banks, common assessments. We have a lot of great plans about how to use this work and this collaboration that will come back to benefit the children in North Reading. There's a lot going on at the elementary level. We wanted to focus mostly here on what's happening at the middle school. In 2011 and 12 and 12-13, the teachers have been exploring the new standards. They're using their current Passport textbook series, but they're coming up with Common Core, scope, and sequence. So the teachers looked to their texts and they said what needs to be tweaked and changed in order to be Common Core. So the teachers have done a lot of work here. There's been involvement with our math leaders and our 8th grade teachers with a similar SEAM group that's meeting with member districts participating. That participation continues in the spring and the summer, and we're making adjustments in 6th and 7th grade that's already in place. The biggest change that I'm going to talk about now is what's happening in 8th grade. So there's a huge amount of increased rigor for 8th grade standards. You may remember that in the past, there were the first set of 8th grade standards that came out in 2000. Folks thought that they weren't preparing students well for high school algebra, and so there was a change to adopt a lot of algebra standards from the old high school algebra standards into the 8th grade. That's something we do in North Reading. We have a high school algebra, we have an algebra part 1 and an algebra part 2. The most important thing that I want folks to take away from tonight is that the new 8th grade Common Core standards are much more rigorous than both the old 8th grade standards and the old algebra standards. So as we talk about these shifts, keep in mind that everything we're doing is increasing the rigor and moving forward. And this is a decision, once again, that everyone in the state is going to. This is not just something North Reading is doing. So the 2011 grade 8 standards are significantly higher rigor than former grade 8 standards. The new standards address foundations of algebra by including content that was formerly a part of the Algebra 1 course standards. There's an in-depth study of linear relationships and equations, functions, irrational numbers, sophisticated statistics, and geometry that relates to algebra. There's a 2011 Model Algebra 1 course that builds on the 2011 grade 8 standards and is correspondingly more advanced than the 2000 Algebra 1 course. This 2011 Model Algebra 1 course is a high school course that will be developed and implemented in the future. That is a high school course. So what does this mean? These are the pathways for students. For students who study in 8th grade standards in grade 8, there are pathways that will still lead them to advanced mathematics courses in high school, such as calculus. This is the model that we will have in place starting next year. We will have grade 6 math, grade 7 math, and grade 8 math. Students can still get to the calculus pathway by doubling up in high school. This happens already. Students commonly double up in high school. But students would either double up in their freshman year by taking Algebra 1 and geometry, or in their sophomore year taking Algebra 2 and geometry.
Can I stop you for a second there?
Sure.
I guess I'm confused here. I thought in the past that you could take algebra, grade 8 was considered Algebra 1, you took geometry freshman year, and then you took Algebra 2. So I'm not an educator, but this makes no sense to me.
So this is the shift. The current Algebra 1 that's taught right now partly in 8th grade, partly in 9th grade, is being replaced by a more rigorous Algebra 1 that is a high school course only. So the 8th grade course that's taking its place better prepares you for that high school course than anything that's come before. But the biggest change for not this September, but the September after, is that students will not be taking only geometry in 9th grade. All students will be taking Algebra 1, and some students will be taking both Algebra 1 and geometry. The other option is that they would take Algebra 2 and geometry at the same time the following year.
So I know so are we, Are we making grade 8 math easier? I'm not understanding this.
Sure. We're making grade 8 math. Grade 8 math is more difficult than it's more rigorous than it's been in the past. The shift is the high school courses are also more rigorous than they've ever been in the past. So currently we're teaching a split Algebra 1 course that's not as rigorous as what's coming next. So we're increasing the rigor of these courses as they get older.
And the current course that we teach in grade 8 right now no longer exists in the Common Core. When the Common Core is fully implemented, which needs to be done, it's mandated, when it's done in 2013, 2014, the current course we teach doesn't exist. The new algebra course that will exist at the high school is a high school Algebra 1 course, different than what we currently teach.
And this is probably why I had misgivings about the Common Core, but you can go on. This to me sounds like we're making 8th grade math easier and we're pushing algebra up to freshman year when we've been trying to teach algebra to 8th graders for many years in this district and other districts.
Sure. And that's the main thing, and we have plenty of information. We're going to get to a parent out here. Plenty of information about how that was really a reaction to poor standards in the past. All of the research shows that this model is more successful in getting students prepared for algebra. There was a lot of reteaching in high school, and there's a lot of preparation that was done by preparing students the way that was done in the past. We are, all of the research showing that 8th grade algebra is not as successful as what this new program suggests. In the future, we are considering an accelerated pathway. As that high school course is developed, and I want to remind everyone that this is a more advanced Algebra 1 course at the high school. As that high school course is developed, we will discuss the possibilities of offering this course in the middle school. This would be an accelerated pathway, which would take those grades 6, 7, and 8 math and combine them and compact them, allowing students to take a compacted 8th grade math and an Algebra 1, a high school course, in its entirety in the 8th grade. This again would be for students learning advanced work at an accelerated pace. This would be for us. This would not be the same amount of students currently taking algebra in the middle school. This would be for a very select group of students. We would have a common assessment probably at the end of 6th grade that would determine the placement to go into that accelerated pathway. And those assessments are things that are being discussed at this time for the future, to put students in that pathway. Again, to take an accelerated high school course in middle school. It is a shift, and the hardest part about this, I think, is that the names, you still think of Algebra 1, Algebra 1, but when you actually dig deeper and see what the standards are behind those course titles, you see that they're more rigorous, and they're more rigorous at an earlier age. So it's a little bit hard to wrap around because of the names of the courses. In high school, as we move forward, there will be changes to what's currently the Algebra 1 course, currently the Geometry course, and currently the Algebra 2 courses. There are things that shift from other courses, and those courses get increasingly more rigorous. We want to be ahead of the curve, so we're going to start talking with our high school teachers this year to be developing those curricula for the coming year after that. Again, there's many collaborative opportunities as every district around is going through the same process. So we're coming together to talk about what those model Algebra 1 courses look like, what other districts are using for the placement test that puts you into these higher rankings. So I think the concern that was voiced about the naming of the course as 8th grade math sounding less rigorous. That's why I'm trying to stress it over and over again tonight. There's a lot of material and documentation from the state to support that this is much more rigorous than we've ever had before with the old algebra standards.
Yeah, it seems to me that they would have done better if they just had it called it 7th grade math, 8th grade math, 9th grade math, 10th grade math, 11th grade math.
There are some options. We did discuss with the high school principal whether we didn't want to switch the title from, because there's another whole pathway at high school that's not traditional. Instead of teaching Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, you actually teach these integrated courses that's much more similar to what you're describing, I believe, like a 9th grade math and 10th grade math. Those are things that are still, we're investigating and considering them. At this time, we're not going to make those changes. But I think as we see some of the pending changes with assessments might be going to more grades. You might have an 11th grade assessment. You might have some other things to consider. So those options are still available. I personally wish they had named it something other than 8th grade math, because that sounds a little bit less than the high standard of algebra in 8th grade, but it's actually a higher standard than we've ever had before. Kat, did you want to speak to the parent item? I'm sorry, I forgot about this slide.
Well, obviously, this needs to be communicated to parents, and as we're going to be sending out course information for the fall, we need to, hold a night where parents can come and have their questions answered. So we've chosen April 23rd, and at that meeting, I will be presenting, Patrick will be presenting, John Bernard will be there to answer any questions that, parents of future high school students will have, and Diane Moody, the math curriculum specialist, will also be there. So I think it's very important that this get communicated as soon as possible, and that parents have every opportunity to ask questions. There will be a lot of questions. I think my big focus is that I want the community to know this is not something that North Reading is just choosing to do. This is something that all communities are mandated to do to fully implement the Common Core. And we will not be working in isolation. We'll be utilizing all the towns that are part of SEAM to work together to provide the best possible mathematics education to our students.
Let's hope it works.
Any questions, Karen?
So I think I would find it helpful as a follow-up to see a comparison of the current track with what the Common Core is in terms of content. I think that's what I'm struggling with, and maybe some of the other committee members might struggle with, also parents. It's nice to know kind of what the learning objectives are for what they are right now, what they're expected to learn, and then compare that with what's new, what's different, and what are we getting rid of or moving, so they can kind of see the difference. Because I understand the sequencing and why we're doing it, but I don't understand the what.
Absolutely. I didn't get into a lot of the math, I just touched on the math. There is a crosswalk document that shows you specifically with grade 8.
That's great.
It shows you grade 8 math, old algebra 1, and what's new in the comment section. So this is really helpful. I can share this electronically.
Yeah, if we could get a copy of that, that would be
This is
great.
what we will have available on that night. We'll go into more detail to the mathematics part of it.
Yep.
So that those, the increased rigor can be more clear. You can see where some of those key shifts fall.
I have another question, but I did see a question from the audience. Marcy?
Yes, thank you. I have a question for the top components. So the first current grade that this affects will be the current 7th grader or the current 6th grader?
This middle school change will go into effect in the fall for the 8th grade, so the current 7th
The current
grade.
7th graders, and then it will continue on through the high school curriculum. So the current 8th graders and beyond will take what they have to choose with what the current sequence is. And I guess, has there been thought or analysis done? It seems to me that for then a student to make it through calculus, one of their electives in high school will have to be used as math, which is not the case now for students who take calculus in grade. But has there been some thought to the curriculum of what happens in, whether students will, as many students will make it calculus because they'll be willing to give up an elective for another math, and also the demands on the math department at the high school for having essentially telling students in high school you have to take an extra math course to make it to calculus, which is required by many colleges for admission. So I just wonder if you could address those issues.
Well, I just know that we're, ongoing communication with John Bernard is well aware of the impact that this will have on the high school in terms of their ability to meet the needs of the students. In terms of the elective choice, we have talked, but it's still early, about possibilities of summer offerings for those students who choose to participate, in a summer enrichment offering that may be able to bump them up so that they didn't have to double up. But I don't think we're prepared to go into any details about what that might look like at this point. We're just beginning discussions. But again, that could be something that's done in collaboration with other communities to put together something to help students.
Because I guess a similar thing would happen in all communities.
Yes.
This is
So to answer the question as well, Mr. Bernard assured us that when we look at the numbers, there are a lot of students who already double up. They either take, most of them take geometry and algebra 2 in sophomore year. So this would be an increase in the number taken in their freshman year. And that will have an impact on some elective programs. But I think there's going to be a lot of shifts as the high school redesigns their courses. There's going to be some shifts in things. We're going to continue to guarantee students as many electives as possible. But this is all part of an increased rigor towards higher standards for mathematics and science. You're going to see a lot more elective choices being geared towards increased mathematics and science classes.
I just want to make one last comment. I have full faith and confidence in our administration and teachers. I have little faith and confidence in this core curriculum. I was skeptical about it from the beginning. I believe it takes Massachusetts backwards. That's my personal opinion. That's not the school committee's opinion. I'm extremely concerned that kids aren't going to be able to take calculus unless they double up on math in a year or take a summer course. I don't understand the logic in that. I think there's no logic in that. Again, I'm not putting the blame on you. I just think that this is the wrong way to go. And I think we're going backwards to accommodate school districts that can't compete with what we do in Massachusetts. And I think that's a big mistake. I don't know if anybody else has any comments, but I'm tired of the federal and state dictation of how local communities educate their kids. I'm just tired of it.
The only thing I would add, with all respect to Mr. Webster, is that many high school teachers have said that they do a lot of reteaching of the algebra concepts in the freshman year. And so there are data available to support the fact that some students in 8th grade are not developmentally ready for the algebra concepts. So it would be interesting to do a longitudinal study in a few years to see are children more successful when they are developmentally ready for the algebra concepts in high school versus giving it to them in 8th grade ready or not. So.
And I believe that. I guess what I see, though, is standards being built to accommodate lower performing states and districts in this country. And I think that's what we have here, and we're going to have the least common denominator standard. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think Massachusetts shares that opinion, and you're going to see, first of all, our math frameworks are higher standard than the Common Core because of that very reason. So you'll see there's lots of standards with little asterisks in them that are Massachusetts plus, it's Common Core plus, and it's enhanced. And I think you're going to see the more information that comes out about these new assessments that are coming out, we're going to see whether Massachusetts feels that same way, because we will not, the state, I trust that the state is telling us that they will not sink down. We have already set the bar pretty high. I've seen a lot of presentations where Massachusetts compares itself to the world,
right,
and it will say, here's how the rest of the United States did, here's how Massachusetts did. And so I am confident that they will continue to hold that high standard. So I'm optimistic. I hope it's
Just
true.
want Dana had a comment.
Deanna?
I just had a question about the Common Core standards are coming as a Massachusetts mandate, and if there are new textbooks and resources that are going to be needed, are they going to supply funding for that?
Rhetorical
Pretty
question.
funny.
But very important question.
It's a very good question.
To answer the question, though,
It's not a good question. The answer's no.
The answer is no.
We definitely will be, because there's a lot of change in the way what a textbook is and what a textbook looks like. There's a huge shift in, as we're aware, electronic books, open source materials, finding a lot of materials out there. The first thing that happened as far as textbook materials, and the reason why we as a district didn't jump in to get new Common Core, was they just slapped a new cover on an old book. That happened a lot, to the point that the national Common Core folks and the state folks told us over and over, don't jump into, don't do anything. They're actually giving us guidelines, things to look for when you're adopting a book. Those books are starting to come on now, and this is, I think, important when we talk about, new textbooks. I think folks at home might think, well, the book I have is good, it's in good condition, but it's not really that. It's about what the content is. And as the content changes, we do need to explore, are there better textbooks and materials to help us to do this with the end in mind? It's the books that are coming out now were designed from the get-go with the Common Core standards in mind. And that involves not just, as I've alluded to in the past, it's not just what students need to know and be able to do, but it's also the way we instruct, the kind of thinking, the way we go deeper to really get a conceptual understanding. So those books are, and the programs are really designed with that in mind. But unfortunately, there is no funding, as we know, it's unfunded.
Any other questions, comments?
The only other question I have is, again, I'm concerned about our advanced students and being able to get them to where they need to be at the end of this trajectory. And I fully embrace sort of realignment with developmental readiness, but I'm just wondering, when I hear summer course, I start to, alarm bells go off in my head about, okay, we have to pay for that, we have to figure out how to resource that particular thing. And I know you're probably already thinking about, recommendations through Kathy to us about how to do that. So we're at a budget hearing. What are your how would that work?
The summer piece would not be a permanent solution. That would be sort of
A holdover transition?
It would be
Okay.
just because we're in a transition right now, just trying
Gotcha.
to not to have as many pathways available to students as possible. Because we don't have that model algebra 1 course designed yet, and,
Yeah.
and it's a transition. We're still, this information is accelerated pathway right now, it does not make sense. So we've thought about being creative with those students that are currently in AZ right now. But the solution of doubling up, Mr. Bernard again has assured us that that is not that uncommon, that students would double up in high school already with some of those kids. But we have a few other solutions that we would consider.
Understood.
But of course, yeah, financial
Okay.
everything.
Can we go back to that
We
topic?
do hope to have that other pathway in the coming years, as these things are developed, so students will have that. But again, I just want to say, that's not for everybody. That's really for your top students who are able to place out and take a high school course in a middle school. It's a little bit different than exposure to a high school course or half of a high school course. This is a
Yep.
full course, and they would be, if they were to be tested, they would take that high school, that 10th grade test could possibly be given in middle school. That's not clear yet. They haven't made a decision on that yet. But that's one of the things that I've heard is that they might, if they take the high school course, they would take the high school test. So that's how serious this course is for the students that we take it.
Thank you.
Okay. I hope you take my comments for what they were. I have complete confidence in our team. Other than that, I won't go any farther. I think I've already lost my mind tonight over this issue, so.
You're a budding libertarian, Mel.
I
You
am.
really are.
I am. Brom Paul is
Come over
living
to
in my
our
left
side.
foot somewhere.
What do you mean outside?
Thanks very much.
I don't know what you're doing here.
Okay. Next, we'll move into a more boring item after the math core curriculum, and that's our public budget hearing. Mr. Nelson has prepared a presentation for us. I think we're in pretty good shape. We still have a few issues to work out in terms of funding, but Carl, if you want to take over?
So we're here to talk, this is our budget hearing for FY14. And as we start to think about and plan what we see for the upcoming school year, 2013, 2014, I think it's helpful to set some context. Every single budget year is different. The typical person who follows budget processing, you may think that every year is kind of the same. But there is no script. Each and every year has different issues, different backgrounds, different funding sources. I think you'll find as we talk through this presentation, you're going to see how this particular year is going to be more heavily dependent on non-general fund sources than we've seen in recent years. We'll illustrate that as we move ahead. And as we think about this budget year, I thought it would be helpful to, if you will, go on a journey with me, so to speak, and think about the impact of the budget on a student who started their education here in North Reading Public Schools in FY01 as a pre-K student. And it's kind of interesting to follow that continuum and get a sense for what the budget impact was in the good times and in the lean times on that student, because it is that student who will reach 12th grade next year. Happens to be the exact years I've been here in North Reading too, by the way. But when you think about the pre-K students in FY01, those were fairly generous years for school budgets. In those years, FY01, FY02, FY03, the average budget increase to the general fund was 6 to 8%. We have to remember that those were years where our enrollment was growing fast and local revenue sources were perhaps more plentiful than they are now. So that student who started in pre-K and gets into second, third, fourth grade was experiencing a lot of growth, particularly in the elementary school, where we were adding teachers and adding sections to try to keep class sizes low. And those were the challenges in those years, was keeping class sizes in that low 20 area. However, that same student, actually, by the time that student was in the fifth grade, in the third grade, FY05, the budget increase actually reached 10% for the school department. So you can kind of see through the elementary years, that student participated in a lot of growth. Things began to change for that student in the middle school years, however. Many of you will remember by the time that student reached sixth grade, that was the year of the half-day Wednesdays. And that was a year where the school department, I believe, literally reduced its teaching staff by 15 FTE. Over 20 teachers reduced their full-time equivalent load that year. And that was a tough year for perhaps that student and for many families in North Reading. That year, however, was followed by an operational override. The North Reading residents supported an operational override that following year, FY09, which resulted in ultimately about $1 million increase to the school budget, and that represented about an 8% increase. As that student moved into high school, things began to change. The economic slump occurred. We were struggling to maintain level services, struggling to maintain our same teaching levels. If it were not for the bailout, so-called federal bailout money, which we called ERA, we would have reduced our staffs significantly. I would have seen 2 or 3 straight years of 10% reductions in North Reading staffing numbers if it were not for those ERA funds. So by the time that student reaches 12th grade next year, we'll see what happens. That's what we're here to talk about tonight. But I think it's interesting to understand the vicissitudes of how budgets change from year to year. So, as I said, I think it's important to set the context by trying to understand where the money comes from. There are a lot of challenges when you're putting together local budgets. And the pie that represents the town and school budget slanted towards the school in this particular pie chart shows that about 3/4 of our funds come from property taxes. In second place is state aid, which we call Chapter 70. By the way, we still don't really know what our Chapter 70 allotment is going to be. This budget will be predicated upon our best assumptions at this point. The next 2 sections of the pie constitute local receipts and fees and grants. And you're going to be seeing as we move ahead tonight that portion of fees and grants is going to be higher this year than we've seen in other years. As illustrated here. In order to try to make up some of the gaps, we're going to present to you our best assumptions for how we can use local sources, school sources, to try to maintain a level services operating budget next year. When you go to town meeting, of course, you are primarily supporting what we call the town meeting appropriation for school budgets. And the present number that we're looking at is at the top, on that top row, $25,624,000. But I thought it was appropriate also to show you how much additional funds, that's about 10% of our budget at this point, comes from non-tax appropriated funds. So the total budget request, if you were to look at all of the dollars that North Reading Schools proposes to spend next year, reaches $28 million next year. Let's break down those non-general fund offsets, or in other words, the non-appropriated funds that the school department uses every year to try to maintain operational level services. As we know, revolving funds constitutes a large part of the pie for North Reading Schools. Parents of North Reading students, unfortunately, are beset with paying athletic fees, oftentimes busing fees. If they're a kindergarten parent looking for full-day kindergarten, they're paying for kindergarten fees. There are several other revolving funds, but I've just listed 3 of them. 2 others that people probably are aware of would be pre-kindergarten. If you're sending your child to preschool, you pay a tuition fee for that. If your child is involved in club activities, there's an extracurricular fee. So that yields about $1 million a year to the school department. In second place, well, in the second row, you see grants. The 2 largest grants that North Reading Public Schools is successful in procuring each year are what we call the SPED Entitlement Grant and a Teacher Quality Grant. These are entitlement grants, and I think it's important at that point to also note to people, there's a lot of talk sometimes about why don't you write more grants, why don't you try to be more aggressive. It's not a bad idea, but you have to understand that almost all the grants that North Reading competes for is based on demographics, based on per capita income, and is not easy for a community such as North Reading to compete in the non-entitlement arena. So about $500,000 from that source. Circuit breaker. Circuit breaker, of course, are funds that come from the state, and they are designed to assist us in paying the expenses of our higher cost special education students. There's an asterisk there beside that and the one below it, because it's important for us to note that what we're doing this year to try to maintain currency in our operational activities is we're really basically clearing out all of our accounts. We're taking some chances here. There are some risks because we still don't even know what the state appropriation for a circuit breaker is going to be. But we're looking at this point to clean out all of the FY13 and the FY14 proposed monies at this point in time. The next row says Scene Trust. Many of you know that, as Patrick mentioned earlier, we're part of the collaborative with our contiguous communities. And as part of that operation, North Reading Schools hosts some special education classes in a couple of our buildings. And as part of that hosting arrangement where children from the collaborative communities come into attendance, there is a rental fee paid in North Reading Schools placed in a trust fund. And the funds that you see listed there, $130,000, represents, I think, as much as 10 years worth of activity. This is activity that hasn't been used for any other purposes. It's just been slowly but surely collecting. And once again, in order to offer an aggressive budget at this stage, we're suggesting that this be part of a way to bridge the gap. So there is a risk there as well for us. We have, based on discussions with Superintendent Willis, we have decided to freeze spending for our expense activities this year. And by virtue of doing that, it is our hope that we will carry forward some funds from this year's operation budget and allow us to mitigate or offer those funds for next year. So this is a quick capsulization of some of the non-appropriated funds that we're proposing to use for next year's budget, $2.5 million. I'm going to go back a slide and show you, once again, that $2.5 million and how it represents the whole. You know, I probably have had a slide like this for many years, but I always think it's worth mentioning. Those of us involved in the budget business, whether it be school or municipal, we're concerned about this structural problem that we face every year. Earlier, we had a slide there that showed that about 71% of the revenues that go into comprising school municipal budgets come from property taxes. Yet when your property taxes are in effect capped at 2.5% and your other local sources are flat, you start to see how difficult it is for us to maintain inflationary costs and salary costs. You know, at the same time, healthcare costs tend to be rising at a rate faster than inflation. And in the school department, and it's not unique to North Reading, our special education mandates are increasing at a rate of 19% a year for the last several years. So boy, it puts challenges on us. And I think it leads to that slide earlier, the dependence on fees to try to make up the difference sometimes. So here's a quick overview of the budget that we proposed. To begin with, we are going to be level funding the school expense budgets for the seventh consecutive year. Each and every year, we talk about the difficulty that poses to the school principals, but they buy into the philosophy that the school committee and the superintendent espouse every year, that being that we want to focus all of our energies on personnel and on teachers. So if there's a way to ensure that budget dollars can go to the classroom, this is one way we do that. An important part of this budget was the NRPS 2016 initiative that I believe Mrs. Willis will speak about a bit earlier. We'll speak about a little bit later. Within the preliminary budget that we distributed a month or so ago, we did include the funding of NRPS 2016, which represents a compendium of growth and vision that has been put together by the Administrative Council under the direction of Superintendent Willis. At this stage in this budget presentation, we're concerned about the fact that we are, at this point, eliminating all of these costs. And as you can see there, that they involved an initiative for enhanced technology integration, some instructional materials for moving forward the No Atom Science Initiative, as well as an attempt to restore professional development. we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Other items worthy of mention here is we do need to provide a location for the high school tennis team to play. So we've added a $20,000 cost to the athletic budget to cover the cost of their court rental for next spring as well as, well, this spring even the FY13 budget. Every 10 years, the New England Association develops and manages an accreditation of the high school. The costs that you see there are the standard cost as recommended by the NEAS, it's called. And those costs cover the cost of the members who come in to manage the accreditation. We are responsible for the room and board of the visiting fellows who come. So that's a new cost that we're absorbing for FY14. It's number 5, is just showing, once again, as I noted before, the increase in special education costs are significant. And we're needing to include those in this budget. That's the year-to-year increase that you see there. Yes?
Can you just explain the $25,000 for room and board doesn't sound right? Can you just clarify what that covers for accreditation?
Sure. I'll pull out the detail of that for you, give you more detail. Thank you, Karen. I suppose as I said that, I realized to say room and board sounded a little inflationary.
It's not the Ritz, let me assure you. It's not.
About 25 rows of information. Let me touch on the highlights. There is a NEAS reevaluation fee of $4,000 included in there. There are clerical expenses that we need to absorb because while the team is here, they require the services of folks who are keyboarding and putting together their work. There are the travel expenses. There are some members who may actually be flying in. The hotel costs are in excess of $5,000 a year for the visit, $5,000 for the visit. We are also responsible, as I noted earlier, for the meals of the group. Why don't here's what I'll do. I'll put up a list of this on the North Reading Schools website so that people who wish to see the details of this can see it.
Thank you, Carl.
So I listed some of the highlights right there. Thank you, Karen. So, each and every year we do make attempts to contain costs. As noted earlier, the school expense budgets are level funded this year. We're very aggressive in North Reading Schools to lower our utility costs. I think people know that. Whether it be natural gas, electricity, telephone, we have a record there of keeping our costs as low as possible. In special education, we continue to look at innovative ways to maintain our students here in district. You'll see in that slide that for 5 consecutive years, our natural gas budget has been level funded, and that's through some years of colder winters and higher costs.
Carl, the new schools will be natural gas also?
Yes.
That's good.
They're totally natural gas. There's no oil in the school department. In special education, we have an outstanding director of pupil personal services who continues to try to develop customized programming to maintain kids in district. It's better for the kids, and it's also economically advantageous. So let's look for a minute. There's a lot of information on that slide, but let's look for a minute at what is driving this budget increase. When you look at the bottom row, you'll see a figure of $154,000. That is the increase that we're requesting in this budget. That represents about a 1.8% increase over FY13. One of the lower increases you'll have seen in this mythical student's career that we talked about earlier. And that $454,000 is broken out by the rows you see. And as you can see, the major driver for that increase right up there are salaries. Having said that, be aware that one of the primary driving forces in years past, which drove the school department budget, was the labor costs. This year, we see a far less expensive labor cost based on the, really the concessions and the negotiation that the school committee worked with the teachers, so that the year-to-year change for salaries is much lower this year than we've seen in years past.
Carl, if I could just expand on that. People see 3.3% and they say, gee, that's a pretty good increase for most of those employees. In the past, as Carl said, you might see 5, 6, or even 7% in that category, and it's because of the way the teachers' contracts are structured. They have a cost of living raise, and then they have a step raise, which ranges anywhere from 3 to 5, almost 6% of their salaries, depending on what year they are. And Carl mentioned the negotiations this year. We spent a long time on this, but we were able to get the teachers to agree. I believe this year is it a
1.75% COLA.
Well, what's the step this year? Half a step?
Half a step.
Half a step. So, and the next year is the same, and we were able to get them to agree with us on that in order to prevent, hopefully, laying off staff. And that's another, when you talk about structural issues in funding, there's structural issues in teachers' contracts that have been in place forever that are also a problem when it comes to budgeting every year.
Thank you, Mel. The reason you see a year-to-year decrease in special ed, instructional expenses, operations and maintenance is because earlier I showed a slide where we are bringing more offsets into the budget. And those offsets are actually going to be supplanting the increase, if that's one way to describe it. The special ed expenses would have been closer to $300,000 on a year-to-year basis, but because we're going to be aggressively using circuit breaker funds, the general fund impact of the use of those circuit breaker funds actually shows a year-to-year negative increase in special education, or a 12% reduction on a year-to-year basis. The bottom number, transportation, $55,000 is our best estimate at this point. We are completing our present 3-year contract with our school bus transportation provider. We're presently out to bid on a new contract, so we don't know what the next 3 years' costs will be. So we're estimating it to be about $55,000. The way we bid our school transportation is we ask for a 3-year level funded contract, so which means that our per day cost per bus is fixed 3 consecutive years. So we will know for the next 3 years what our costs will be. So hopefully we'll save a little money there. We'll see. But it's a little difficult because diesel fuel prices, which really drive school bus pricing, has gone up quite a lot in the last 3 years. So, as I said earlier, the budget drivers here are primarily salaries. So, as we come to an end of this portion of the presentation, we think about what's ahead. We're continuing to have discussions with the finance planning team. I believe we're doing it again this Thursday morning to compare notes. The gap that we're showing in this budget is $274,000 now. We will be making this school budget presentation to the finance committee in a week and a half. The school committee is poised to take their recommended vote on April 29th. That gets forwarded to the selectmen and placed on a warrant. We have town meeting coming up first week of June, the first Monday in June. At the same time, what we'll be doing here is awaiting the state budget actions. We still have a lot of unknowns. We're using some estimated figures for Chapter 70 and the circuit breaker and even our grants. So we're hoping that the state will let us know what our appropriations will be as soon as possible. But it's always dicey as you approach the end of the year. So, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Before I open up for questions to the audience, any questions or comments from any committee members at this time? Questions from the audience? Comments? Deanna?
I have a couple questions. The gas is $274,000. That is enough you said. Does that mean, so I'm going back to the budget overview slide, that you allocated no dollars towards for instance, school 2016, right?
Right.
And my question is, how much would that add up to? Do you know that? And then that does include the high school accreditation for the athletics and the potential increases that.
Yes, unfortunately, at this stage in the budget process, the NRPS 2016 is not included in this proposed budget. And the cost of that is about $175,000.
Yeah, that's about right. And then the rest of it is, what Carl didn't mention also is, there was a request, we were planning on adding one section of Mandarin at the high school. That's been cut. There was a request for an additional humanities teacher at the high school, and that's currently been cut, or is proposed to be cut. And then a half-time position, a middle school health teacher. And the total for all of those items is $261,905.
Just to clarify, it wasn't a cut, we just chose
Right.
not to adopt it.
Right.
Carl, is our number 3 and 4, I'm not clear either. Are number 3 and 4 also not included in the budget? On the budget overview?
Mike, when you say number 3 and 4,
So if we go back to that budget overview slide, can we go back there? I wasn't really clear either, Deanna.
Oh, no, those are all, everything on the budget overview is in the budget. So the deficit, the 274,000 is the difference between the latest number we have from the town on what's available in terms of funds for the school department and the what's the number, Carl? The $25,624,000 budget number that we're requesting for the town. So that 274,000 is the difference between that 25,624,000 that we're requesting, we want to request, and what the town has told us is available as of Friday, as of last Friday. So the point we're trying to communicate tonight is, we're asking the town, Carl had it up there, for a 1.8% increase in what the town will raise and appropriate and then allocate toward the school budget. And then on top of that, we're adding $2.5 million in other sources of spending, some which are recurring, but a good percentage this year which aren't recurring, like the $130,000 from the SEAM Trust Fund. And it's something that we've done in the past, the town's done in the past on the town side of the budget, using one-time funding sources to fund the budget in order to avoid layoffs and cutting programs, et cetera. Jane?
Are there limitations on what the sinking fund can be used for?
Yes, there are. Only special ed costs.
Deanna?
Are there revenues that come in for that? Are you still spending any kind of college professional development?
Yes, we are.
So do we get revenues and
Those are facility use fees that go into the facility revolving account.
Yeah, and those, Carl, that's one of the revolving accounts that Carl didn't have up on the screen, but that's another one that we use every year in our budget. So the rent that comes in for facilities is used in the budget. Anything else? Marcy? Oh, Marcy?
Just for comparison, Carl, the non-tax appropriated funds, which are now at 10% of the budget, could you, the way you just went back, could you go back maybe 5 years, 5 more years, what percentage of the budget is in town?
Yes. You know, what I can do off the top of my head is give you a general sense.
Yeah.
And the revolving funds are relatively stable there, so you won't see a significant change from year to year. The number of athletes paying athletic fees, number of kids riding buses, and et cetera, so that one's relatively level. Having said that, we were surprised to note that we're actually adding a kindergarten section this year. We had been sensing a decline in elementary enrollment, but at the little school, we're adding a full-day kindergarten section based on paid parent tuition. So we'd be interested to see if that is a trend. Grants are very level too. The bottom three are really the non-general fund offsets that won't hold true. the $700,000 figure represents over $200,000 worth of retained earnings. The other reason that went up so fast is this is the time of year where a lot of things, I don't want to say come home to roost, but you develop your budget in the October, November, December period, and you do so in any municipal or public entity. You do so based on your best estimates for the following year. But as the year starts to draw to a close, you start to get more information, which allows you to be a little bit more aggressive. We noted Friday, for example, that the municipal cost of health insurance had been budgeted at 7%, yet we're learning now it may be as low as 3%. So that was great news. Similarly, on the school side, we've just finished, the state develops the following year's circuit breaker budget based on a study of this year's special education enrollment demographics. That was just recently completed, and we have sufficient knowledge now to be able to aggressively budget that figure. And there are all kinds of things happening in March that allow you to get closer to your numbers. So the SEAM Trust, that is a one-time cost. That'll continue to generate money, but it'll take a long time to generate that much money again.
We're basically cleaning that out
Yes,
with that amount,
yeah,
right?
we are.
So it generates $10,000 or $13,000 a year.
Probably, yeah, I
10,000,
think that's a
yeah.
good number. The carry forward is an unknown because, yeah, it's good news that we can use that for next year, yet it's not such good news right now to the principals who have to stop spending. So we have been able to do carry forwards every year, and that's for the same kind of reason. I always like to explain that so people don't think it's some kind of voodoo number. We now know, for example, that in the school department we are not using hardly any legal costs this year. We didn't know that in September, but we do now. So we can use those funds to look at next year. We now know pretty much what our utility costs are going to be. We know what our repair costs for our vehicles are going to be. You tend to budget conservatively until you know what the number is. So that's why a little more money is manifesting itself at this point in the process. But the bottom three are something you can't count on.
Just a couple of comments. There's a caveat on the chapter set on the circuit breaker number because we don't know what that number is going to be because of the situation with the state budget. The governor's proposed, what, a 60% reimbursement rate?
Well, he proposed 70.
70.
Mm-hmm.
But that's based on a lot of new taxes that I'm not so sure are going to get passed. The other thing is when Carl talks about, keeping that kind of retained earnings of $200,000 in the circuit breaker money, if you look at the school budget every year, by the middle of the year, almost every year, Carl is coming to us and saying, we're over budget by X hundred thousand in special education, but we have the money from circuit breaker that we've retained in order to cover it. So that's, again, one of the dangers of not retaining that money, whereas next year, if we get those 3-4 extra kids into the system, we might not have the retained earnings to cover that, which would then mean we'd have to talk to the finance committee or the selectmen and say, how do we pay for this? So that's the other caveat with that.
May I ask just another question?
Sure.
So the budget, on the budget drivers, what you've done, Carl, is taking the increases and offset them by the non-tax appropriated funds, so the bottom line is the appropriation, which I mean.
Yes.
The general government appropriated funds. And I guess just to clarify, follow up on the other question, the $274,000, I understand is just the current gap. That is the gap without the NRPS 2016 in the budget, without the added Mandarin humanities and without China Middle School help.
Yes.
But it does include the China School Team accreditation.
Yes. So all the things you said, the proposals for NRPS 2016 and the additional staff proposals are not included in this budget.
So any, if you indeed did not manage to budget process, I don't think this is part of $274,000 gap that would need to come from.
Yep.
Areas that are existing in the budget, not those.
That's right.
Those positions are not included, not from NRPS.
Yes.
That's right, yeah.
Yes. And I don't know if Mr. Masseri wants to say anything, but, we're having good discussions in finance planning. I know the selectmen are, there's as difficult an issue on the town side as there is on the school side, but I know the selectmen, we're working together to try to make sure that both sides of the house are whole.
We appreciate the partnership.
Yeah. So,
We have scheduled our financial Thursday morning.
right.
Ask the town administrator to go back and take a look at all available funds associated with the budget issue. One of the big drivers on the town side this year, which is starting to grow, it's almost like the same,
Right.
is veterans benefits. And, although we get a 75% reimbursement from the state, the way they reimburse it is on the cherry sheet, which forces it to be a 2-year delay in receiving funds.
So, I mean, in general, I'd say that I'm fairly optimistic in that this is one of the smaller gaps we've had. We are using more one-time funds than we have in the past, but in terms of the gap between what the town says is available revenues right now and what we have, I'm fairly optimistic. Again, the underlying structural problems aren't solved, and we're not going to solve those.
And as far as one-time funds, I mean, we've probably done that 5 times out of the last 10 years, if you include the Arrow money.
Right.
Because the Arrow money was one-time funds. In addition to that, I remember 5 or 6 years ago, we did the same thing with the trust funds. We grabbed
Right.
every nickel that we could get. So people might ask, well, that's not very good planning, how are you going to carry it forward next year? We'll worry about that next year. I mean, that's unfortunately the way the budget system is operating.
And Jerry was still under the belief that we had some ARA funds, but somewhere, but unfortunately.
I don't know. I mean, I thought Obama in his second term would throw us another
couple $100,000 or so.
So it's not uncommon for us to have done this in the past.
Right, I think when you use what you have to get by, as long as you're not taking too big of a risk. It's a disappointment that the NRPS 2016 items aren't in there right now. There's a couple that are really important, so people understand. One of the positions is Assistant Director of Digital Learning. Right now, Patrick Daly, who spoke earlier tonight, is the Director of Curriculum Studies, but he's also Head of Technology. That's not a one-person job. And when you have what we have coming online with our 2 new schools, but even without the 2 new schools, you need someone who's managing technology as a full-time position.
Patrick, do we cover all the positions that you hold right now?
Yeah. For 26 to 2,700, students. The other one is a digital learning specialist. We only have one for 2,700 students, 2,600. We have one digital learning specialist for the entire district. And then the final is the NOADM. It's been a great science program in the 3rd and 4th grades, and we hope to move that to the 5th grade, but that won't happen this year if they put it back in. Now, at the same time, I think we have to be cognizant of the situation that the town is in right now. I mean, the town just opened up its collective wallet a week and a half ago and said, we'll approve more funds to pay for the new high school and the middle school. So I think you have to.
Probably not a good time for an override.
No, I don't think so. No, I think you have. I didn't even hear that word.
It's probably not
out of my vocabulary.
It's probably not a good time.
But I think you have to balance. You have to balance what you ask for, depending on what you've just asked for, in my opinion. And so, while I would love to have this NRPS stuff in here this year, and I think the superintendent's done a great job building a plan, and we did implement year 1 of the program.
We did.
And we're going to continue year 1 of the program.
We are going to continue year 1.
What can you just quickly talk about what that consisted of, what we implemented last year?
Yes.
Or this year was implemented?
One of the things that was most important to the community that I discovered when I first came here, it was part of the entry plan, was omitting the middle school study halls. And so by expanding some of the offerings at the middle school, working with Principal O'Connell, that was virtually eliminated. There was a restructuring and additional staffing put in place in order to accommodate students. We also put into place NOADM in grade 4, and we implemented that this year. We hired an additional technician in the area of technology, which was crucial to moving forward with maintaining and implementing new technology in the district. And I'm blanking on the 4th item right now. but we were able to put 4 items in across NRPS 2016. They are constructivist in nature. 1 year builds upon the last. So we were hoping to continue to move our technology integration major strategy area out of our strategic plan forward by putting these 2 positions in. And I just want to mention, Mel did a great job describing what it means to us as a school district, but this district did employ up to 3 digital learning specialists in the past. So this isn't a new initiative. This is still restoring cuts that have previously happened due to those very difficult financial times that this district experienced. Just to go along with what was said regarding Patrick's responsibilities, you'll find in most of the surrounding districts there is a separate director of technology and a separate either assistant superintendent for curriculum or director of curriculum instruction and assessment. And so as we continue to grow, as we should in the area of technology integration, the responsibilities that are associated with that position far exceed what one person can accomplish. And that's why we found it to be imperative that we include this assistant director, not a full director, but an assistant director of technology or digital learning. So I just wanted to mention that.
So will it change to NRPS 2017 now, and next year will be year 2 of the proposal?
No, I think we'll still continue on our 5-year track. This is a 5-year vision for the future. But as with any vision, you constantly retool, revisit, revise, and still plan for NRPS 2016. We will start taking a look at that, though, in 2015 to come to you with a new proposal as we hit our end target.
Carl, I had one other question, and maybe you're not ready to talk about this tonight. Did you, you mentioned a little bit about the lunch program and the significant reduction in the no lunches being purchased. Will there be ramifications in the budget from that issue, or is that something we can't really quantify yet?
Thank you, Mel. As the general public may know, there were some revised nutritional standards implemented, required revision of nutritional standards in the school lunch program this year. And North Reading is no different from all of our surrounding communities across the nation. We're learning about the fact that the lunch counts are down significantly. So that has been a driving force for some financial problems in our self-supporting school lunch program. It's operating within a revolving account. So yes, Mel, it appears that we're going to have to make additional investment from our general fund to keep the school lunch program in the black, and that is reflected in this budget.
Okay.
That's another one from the mandate.
Yes. Mike?
Kathleen, are we doing anything to keep the No Adam program going in the 5th grade, or are we just eliminating that completely?
We're not ready to eliminate it completely, Michael. I'm still holding out hope that as we continue to move forward the remainder of this fiscal year, we're going to find a way to be able to somehow support either partial implementation, but we've met with so much success around the No Adam, and we are so committed to moving this forward. We may take a look at our operating budgets and slash them so that we can cull little bits of pockets of money from each of the 5 schools to move this forward. We feel that committed to it.
We can't get the PTA legally to donate the No
You
Adam
really,
material?
it's against
or
the law
it
to
is?
tap into other funding to provide curriculum materials that you would expect to put in an operating budget.
The other thing is, what about the busing program? Are we looking at either eliminating it or having a 50% funded through the entire grade process?
Thank you. As people know, we follow the bus Mass General laws exactly as they're written. And the way the laws are written, K through 6 students who live 2 miles or more from the portal of their assigned school, we are required to provide free busing to those students. K through 6, did I say 5?
No, you said 6.
I said 6, okay. K through 6 students who are under 2 miles, we are not required to provide free busing to, and we don't. We charge. Grades 7 through 12 students, regardless of distance, we also charge. Once again, that is the Mass General law. So I say that as a context. So what we also do is we price busing for those who have to pay in such a fashion as to make that portion self-supporting. In other words, the $250 the families pay for the, elective busing pays for the cost of that elective busing. And the cost of busing for those for whom we're required to provide it to, those being the K through 6 over 2 milers, is paid for out of the general fund. So I think I'm trying to answer your question, and I think what I would add to that is if we eliminated elective busing, we wouldn't save any money because it pays for itself. If we wanted to raise more money from busing, we could increase the busing fee. It's $250 per student and $400 max per family, I believe. So that would be the way to raise more money on fee from busing, is just to raise the fees.
But we more or less committed to just making it self-sustaining, so that we weren't going to make a profit on it. I mean, we made
That's
that
been the
commitment a while
philosophy.
ago. Yeah.
Right, so there is no profit made, as you say. It just covers its own cost.
And I think in terms of fees, we briefly discussed them for about 30 seconds at our budget workshop, and I don't think any of us in good conscience could recommend raising fees. If you have a couple of kids in the school system or a couple of kids in high school playing sports and doing extracurriculars, you're laying out over $2,000 a year. And if the kid's taking bus, you're laying out close to $2,500 a year, and I think that's already enough of a burden on parents at this time. So there was no consideration given to increasing fees or finding new fees. Now, one thing I will say is when the new schools are built, I think we'll definitely look into and Mr. Nelson won't be here at that time, but we'll definitely be looking into fees at the high school, middle school for the auditorium and the gym, because those facilities are going to be light years ahead of what we have now, and we'll be able to increase how much we charge.
That's not to say we don't charge fees now, but
Right.
they're very low right now.
Yeah, they're very low, but I think they reflect the
Quality of the
facilities that we're renting out.
Yeah.
We still don't get a lot of customers.
Right, and we
Yeah.
don't get a lot of customers. There aren't many customers to use our auditorium at the high school. I can guarantee you that. Any other questions? Deanna?
What is the meetings we've had in the past? We talked about sharing resources with other schools. Looks like we share sports teams with different communities. Before we give up on Mandarin or technology literacy specialists, are there other communities where it's more goal we might leverage resource or share resource, so we're not spending very much money, but we share with Lincoln or sharing communities?
Sure. The thinking behind the Mandarin teacher was to share with another community. When I worked in a previous district, that's how we launched a new Mandarin program. So you do share the cost with other school districts. And what was projected as the projected cost is a sharing of that teacher.
Right, because we were only looking for a point two teacher. So you're probably not going to get a teacher that's going to come to North Reading if they don't have anything else in the surrounding area. So, I mean, I think another thing we need to explore, and again, this would be a nice task for the Director of Digital Learning, would be online learning and online courses. I think that's something that we really need to start thinking of taking advantage of. Again, we're going to have so much technology in the new school that I think it's going to be a lot easier to bring some of those things into the curriculum.
That is part of the plan.
Yeah.
So
So,
Mandarin was about, what, 10,000 more?
yeah, the
Yeah,
Mandarin,
$10,000.
it was $10,000 for the Mandarin, the 2/10 of the teacher that we were going to get in our district. So, any other questions or comments? Kathy, you want to say anything else?
No, I appreciate all of the efforts. Again, the Administrative Council has been working with our Director of Finance and Operations to put together a responsible budget. We are very thankful to the town for our new vote for the schools. We appreciate that. We recognize the stretch for the members of the community. So we're trying to be as responsible as we can as we move this budget forward. We appreciate all of the efforts of the finance planning team, and we continue to work together to come up with the best resolution for both the municipal and the school department.
And as Mr. Mosseri mentioned, the finance planning team is meeting Thursday, and I think our only item on the agenda is the 2014 budget. And we have another meeting in a couple of weeks, so the goal is to find that $274,000 and hopefully have both sides be pretty much whole coming out the other side with their budgets for next year. So, okay. Seeing no other questions, hearing no other comments, we'll move on to the rest of our agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a little low in attendance.
Okay, next on, we'll go back to continued business, and we have an update on the secondary school building project. Ms. Willis?
Yes, thank you. Just need to move all of the budget materials aside. Well, again, I'd like to begin with a comment, a follow-up to what I just said. At a special town meeting held on Monday, March 18th, and at a special town election held on Friday, March 22nd, the voters of North Reading approved and appropriated an additional $15.5 million to continue the construction of the middle school, high school building project, and for that I am very grateful. The Secondary School Building Committee held its last meeting on March 27th, 2013, and highlights from the meeting are as follows. We had a design update. The Finishes Subcommittee made a recommendation for interior finishes, and this was presented by the architects to the Secondary School Building Committee. After much discussion, the committee voted to approve the minutes of the last subcommittee meeting, hereby endorsing the recommendations that were presented.
And I just, it was, it's kind of strange when you're sitting there and you have all these samples of carpet and tile and windows and roofing and aluminum and everything else, and everybody's so excited in the room acting like a little kid because we're actually finally moving on, and it was really fun. I mean, there was a lot of discussion, but it was really fun because you could kind of, in your mind, see the schools taking shape by just looking at the things that were all standing up there against the wall and on the different display boards they had, and it was a blast.
Such a quick transition, too. We went
Yeah.
from the depths of despair to,
Right.
okay, look at this. We've got
Yeah.
colors, we've got tile.
And I mean, it's unbelievable. There's like, you know, the colors are, it's not like wild colors, but there's like 30 different tiles and colors and carpets and ceiling tiles and window styles and aluminum and.
And if you don't like any of that, you're going to blame the superintendent and the principals because they picked it out. So if you don't like it, it's
This
their
is true.
fault.
There's no orange, is there? No orange.
No.
Zero
No orange or
Okay.
purple.
I think a summary of it is that the woman that was the interior decorator that came in and talked about the colors and all, wanted to join our Masters Club.
Yes.
To give you a hint as to what we were looking at.
And I gotta tell you, it's like, it's the gym, I mean, the whole thing's gonna be cool, but in the gym, they're gonna have green and gold seats. If you went to the basketball game in Burlington, they had the nice, pretty comfortable plastic seats instead of sitting on the wood. And it's gonna be green and gold, the different colors and the different sections.
Those luxury boxes. that
Yeah, the
were on
luxury
top.
boxes.
I mean, if,
One's named after
That's
Jerry.
not
one's
true.
named
Yeah.
after-
For 25,000, you can
Right,
sit in a luxury
right.
box.
25,000, you get your name in a luxury box, there you go. But it was just, I'm sorry to
That's a really
interrupt,
good
but
way of
it was an exciting meeting, and as Jerry said, the transition from woe is me to thank you so much to the community for letting us move forward, and it was like, I mean, it wasn't really like that for us that have been involved, but it was like that from going from Friday to Tuesday night, so.
Thank you. I shared your excitement. It was wonderful being part of the Finishes Subcommittee with the principals, as well as representatives from the Secondary School Building Committee. And at times we felt a bit schizophrenic. We were euphoric picking these finishes out, and yet we weren't sure that we were going to be able to actually see them to
Right.
fruition. But it is very exciting now. And as you know, if you've been on site, the steel continues to go up. The project is taking shape. It's wonderful to drive by every day, and the landscape is changing that much more. Mr. Bowers is our resident expert. He's on site very often. I don't know if you want to add anything, Mr. Bowers? You're
Yeah, I can add a little bit.
Okay.
We've finished the retaining wall along the east side of Main Street that provides the lower level from a two-story, or single-story portion. That's the truckway and some of the area alongside of the theater. The theater foundation walls are near finished. There's one wall that still is coming back. This way they have to leave a little gap so they can get trucks in to move the concrete to the rest of the structure. The fill has come up along the area under Main Street and the administrative offices, the entrance to the school. The steel is looks like it's not as big as everybody thought, but it's only about a third of it up. They have to go to put the steel deck panels in each of the 3 levels before they can move forward. Next thing you're going to see is the distance learning lab curved portion coming up, and then the columns reaching out the rest of the way along the front and along the side. That'll be pretty astounding, but when you start seeing the theater piece that extends out beyond that coming up, it'll give a real good perspective of what the school's going to look like.
I think one other important thing that's going to be happening, because the community will notice this, especially the high school community, and Carl has been involved in this, is they're going to start constructing the access road, which is going to run up, if you know where the buses park now on the main entrance side of the high school, they're going to start constructing the entrance road, which means Carl has to find some place to park the buses. His front yard didn't work, so now we're looking for.
I was going to ask Mr. Venezia.
Oh, you may have room in here. You may have room.
Pull them up, huh?
But Carl's actually already working on that. But that's a big project, getting that road started, and they're going to be able to do a lot during the school vacation week. So they want to get that started now and get that staged, because it's a long and winding road, and they need to get started on that now. And Carl's working on locations for the buses. So.
And the high school access road will be blocked off for a little bit.
Right.
While they're doing that.
Yeah.
And actually, beginning on Thursday, April 11th, and continuing through Sunday, April 28th, there will be no access to the main parking lot adjacent to the main office at the North Reading High School via Park Street. The access and exit from the main parking lot during this time will be available through Dodge Road. So this is some additional information that I have received.
Now, have we? I don't know if you've been here. There's been issues with Dodge Road before and traffic on that road. Cars speeding around the corner, buses, and so I guess what I'm asking is, there may be a need for extra police details up there during the beginning and the end of school and beginning of school.
There's a substantial police presence on Oakdale already.
Every morning.
Don't go over 20 miles an hour.
No, but
on
what I'm trying to do is prevent people from Dodge Road having to come to the school committee after this happens to complain about the traffic, the noise, the speeding, et cetera.
I'll touch base with our OPM, Jeff Wetton.
Because all those people should be notified.
Yes.
I believe
I
that's-
think.
Yep.
As a courtesy, I
Yes.
think. They've come to us before, and
Right.
it's important to,
Yeah.
to us to
The
address.
the one saving grace for them is that this is a short-term thing.
Right.
And that in the long term, there will be no connection with Dodge Road.
It's only a couple of weeks, right?
Yes.
Okay.
During April vacation week, there'll be no vehicle access at all to the main parking lot because they are going to be working on the water drainage system. And so they want to capitalize on when there are no teachers' cars parked in that main lot and there are no students on campus. So anyone needing to access the high school during April vacation may park in the parking lot adjacent to the gymnasium. So there's still access to the high school, but it's through the gymnasium parking lot where students typically park. So moving through, again, what took place at the last secondary school building committee, there was a brief discussion regarding the outcome of the special town meeting and election, and a lot of praise and thanks to the voters for approval of the additional funds. We did go into executive session to discuss, review, and approve minutes from previous executive sessions that were held on February 12th and the 26th. And the next secondary school building committee meeting will take place on Tuesday, April 9th, beginning at 5:30 p.m. in the high school modular cafeteria.
I think one thing that I wanted to emphasize that Kathy didn't mention, but is in her brief report here, there was much discussion and much direction directed at the professionals in the room in terms of, get this done on time, and get this done, if at all possible, under budget. Because there's just, there's no way we can go back to this town for another cent. And what we really want to have happen is for some money to come back to the town so we don't have to borrow as much. And I think they took that message to heart, from what I could see. And I think the team we have now, I'm pretty confident in. I think that Jeff Wetton from PMA and the Gilbane folks, and those are going to be the two main Dora Whitty is still involved, but the design is, and we will be opening bids from the subcontractors on the 5th of April, or the
April
4th?
5th.
April 4th. It's the
4th.
4th.
All
So
bids.
we'll be getting all bids in from the subcontractors on April 4th, which is, again, that's another exciting phase of the project. So I just can't wait till September 2014.
Those bids are covered by the guaranteed maximum price in
Correct.
any event.
Correct. Any other questions or comments? Anna?
Superintendent Wells, can you just briefly talk about the finishes as it relates to special education? Because I've been at a lot of meetings where special education parents were concerned about the finishes.
Yes. I think there was some conversation around the acoustics in particular, and I know that a parent has attended a planning meeting with the designers as well as the OPM. And while there won't be rooms outfitted with the special acoustic accommodations, all of the infrastructure will be put into place so that can be added gradually. It is cost prohibitive, but we will continue to do what we do now. When we have a student that requires a modification or accommodation because that student is either deaf or hard of hearing, we have devices that we use in classrooms so that students have access to hear what the teacher is saying. We will have that infrastructure in some of our common spaces, though. And that will, the common spaces like the Library Media Center or the auditorium, so that all students have access to what's taking place in those general facilities. But we continue to have conversations with some of the parents that have brought that information forward, and they are notified when there are going to be meetings around those particular topics. So, and we will have stair treads on the stairs so that students that may have any challenges with their sight don't have a compromised safety issue when moving up and down the stairs.
Anything else in school? Okay, next we're going to move on to the 2012-2013 school committee self-evaluation. And we always score high on our self-evaluation, of course. And I do want to say, though, when you read about things that go on in other towns, I feel really fortunate to be part of this school committee. When I see the superintendent of Marblehead resigning because he can't work with the school committee.
When did that happen?
About a week ago. It was last Sunday. It was in the Globe. I think something like that is appalling when the superintendent makes recommendations and school committee members ignore those recommendations and put other policies into place. They just
had Western Massachusetts, they just had
Same
something
thing?
like that happen too. And I think, didn't they say in Marblehead that they've had 5 superintendents in the last 6
It
years?
was like 5 in the last 6 or 7 years,
Yeah.
and they've had superintendents in Marblehead. So I don't see how you can effectively run a school district with that kind of rancor, I guess, among the school committee members. But I'll let Ms. Willis take over here on the self-evaluation.
So in the fall, I did attend the MASC conference, and I visited the school committee display. I was speaking with Michael Gilbert, who is the executive director of MASC, and a pamphlet that they had on the table was titled School Committee Self-Evaluation. And what it is essentially is a boiled-down version of what this school committee's evaluation subcommittee went through over the last several years.
We were
Mrs.
light
Eric
years
Ketty
ahead of that.
was on that
Thank
committee.
Way ahead of our time.
Way ahead of our time.
And Mr. Bowers, and now it's Mr. Webster and Mr. Bowers. And so the evaluation subcommittee met recently to take a look at this other version from MASC, and they compared it to their current self-evaluation. And so what we're doing is we're trying to mesh the two into a simpler, easier, user-friendly format that reflects all of the essence of what has already been done in this district and accommodate what was in this new school committee self-evaluation. And so I've received feedback from both Mr. Bowers and Mr. Webster. I will make the revisions. The subcommittee set forth a timeline for distributing this new self-evaluation so that the school committee can again engage in this exercise that we use as the basis for goal setting for the next year. Mr. Venezia will be leading that. On April 8th, we will distribute the evaluation forms. We can do this both electronically and as well as by paper, so you'll need to let me know which way you would like to receive it. Then school committee members will fill that out, and then we will collect the individual evaluations on April 29th. On May 10, there will be a compilation of results for the evaluation subcommittee meeting that will come together hopefully on that date. And then Mr. Webster and Mr. Barrows will present the results at the school committee meeting on May 20th. So that is the timeline that has been laid out for the school committee to engage in this process for the 2012-13 school year.
Any questions? If you remember the first year we did it, it was really complicated, and we had that matrix of, there were like
It was a rubric.
A rubric, matrix was one of those things, and it had way too much information on it. And then we simplified it, and then we looked at the MASC and the MASC form, and it was pretty similar to what we've come up with, what you and Cliff came up with last year. So what we've just done is, and Cliff, did the bulk of the work on this. We're adding in a few of the things from the MASC form that we weren't covering on ours, and pretty much keeping, because we had already kicked out a lot of the stuff on ours that wasn't relevant.
Stuff that wasn't
Yeah,
relevant to our
relevant to
district
us.
at all.
So it'll be pretty simple. It's, it's the same thing for categories.
Are we going to be able to evaluate ourselves separate and apart from the rest of the committee members?
Well, you usually do anyway.
That's what I usually ought to base it on.
Yeah.
I don't want to, all right.
You always win the longevity part of it. So.
The purpose is to identify areas for improvement
Yeah.
or our new goals, and so,
Right.
and to kind of assess where we've been. So to the extent that we already did this process and we can continue to move it forward, I think that's
Yeah.
great.
Areas of improvement, why would we bother? I mean,
Just put this
All
in
right.
there. You're leading it, so.
All right.
Yeah,
The goal is to
Jerry's in
improve.
charge of goals this year. It'll be a quick meeting. Yes, I do too. Yes. Oh, you have a question? Okay. Next, I thought we approved this, but I see the school district calendar.
Yes, this is this year's calendar, and
Oh.
just for the purpose of making sure that we're all on the same page. As a result of the last snow day that was called on March 19th, all 5 snow days that were built into the school calendar for this year have been used. So as of today, the last day of school is Tuesday, June 25th, 2013. And I just want to make sure that if for any reason we needed to shut the district down, and I don't anticipate snow, but we still have 3 days left in June that we could tap into, should we need to, before reaching that final day of June on June 28th for the school year. So right now, though, the last day of school is identified as Tuesday, June 25th. I know that some school, and that is a Tuesday, some school districts are taking a look at Saturday school and having school not that last week of June, but I am not making that as a recommendation. We have 2 days. We can come back, and should we need any additional days, we can tap into those last 3 days, but I do not anticipate that need. Are we on the same page as far as that's concerned?
Any questions, comments on that?
Okay. The next item under calendar, it's on the next page of my notes to you. March 8th was an early release day, and it was a snow day. We had to cancel that. And the purpose of that early release day was to engage in professional development focused on the new educator evaluation system to be implemented in this school district next year. So the administrative council came together and requested that I bring forward to you a request to reinstate an early release day prior to the end of this school year. So the proposal that's before you today is to identify a different Friday, May 24th, which is the Friday before the Memorial Day long weekend, for the purpose of professional development to make up for March 8th. So I put that before you today as a recommendation.
This has no impact on time and learning hours.
No, it doesn't. Actually, the day that we lost for snow has been added on to the end of the school year.
Okay,
So it's
okay.
essentially the same.
Same thing, okay.
It's the same thing. It would just be modifying the calendar as you had previously voted. So if you agree to add this early release day, you will need to take a vote to amend the current year's calendar.
Well, it's actually a good day to have it on that day, too, so the kids can get out a half day early on a long weekend.
We did have quite a bit of discussion at the Administrative Council, and that, at the end of the day, that was what was determined to be in the best interest of students and adults.
Can I have a
And that
motion?
day is already planned. We had to cancel it, though. So
Can I-
it's not like we have to do any additional planning for March.
Can I have a motion to change the calendar for this school year and to make Friday, May 24th, 2013, a early release day for teacher training?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
I will get a notice out to parents.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next, we have, and this is part of another one of those state mandates, the new evaluation programs being put into place for teachers and administrators. And the superintendent, we've already had part one of this meeting. The superintendent is part of that evaluation process, and she is evaluated by the school committee. And it's kind of reflective of what we've done the past several years before Kathy got here. A little bit different now, but we did this with David Troughton back many years ago. But now it's a little more involved, and tonight Kathy's going to present her educator plan as part of her evaluation.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. You may recall on March 11th, I came to you at a school committee meeting and presented to you the potential goals for the next 15 months. You may recall that under the new educator evaluation form, I must have one student learning goal, and that's true for all educators in the district. I must have one professional practice goal. That's true for all educators across the district. And then what's special to the superintendency is there needs to be 2 to 4 district goals. So I'd like to orient you to this educator plan that you have in front of you, and then I'll go through it in more depth. So, on page 1, you'll see that the student learning goal that I had proposed to you on March 11th is identified as the median MCAS student growth percentile, also known as the SGP, for mathematics will increase from 2013 to 2014 in at least 4 out of 6 grade levels. If you turn to page 3, you'll see the professional practice goal, and that reads as, the superintendent will improve her skills at debriefing classroom observations done jointly with principals focused on mathematics in at least 1/4 of her classroom observations and follow-up discussions with principals. If you turn to page 4, I will take you through a review of the district goals. And I just want to bring your attention to, I have moved from 5 district goals to 3, and I'm going to describe for you how that happened. The first district goal reads the same as was proposed on March 11th. By June 2014, administrators' ratings of classroom instruction will reflect a greater shared understanding of what classroom teaching and learning entails when done at the proficient level. So there's no change there. If you move to page 5, district goal number 2, what I did was I combined 2 of the proposed goals that I had presented to you on March 11th into the actions. They were more actions than they were goals, and I wrote a broader goal to encompass those.
I think we talked about that at the March 11th.
I think you did.
Yeah.
So the broader goal now reads, by June 2014, year 1 of a 2-year implementation plan for the new educator evaluation system will be completed. We'll go back and look at the actions in a minute. And then the 4th goal that had been proposed, which was talking about a common model for response to intervention, has been subsumed under my student learning goal as an action. So I'll go back and talk about that in a minute. If you look at page 6, the 3rd district goal is not changed, and it reads as follows. Year 3 of NRPS 2016, a plan for continuous improvement, will be supported and implemented by June 2014. So that just orients you to the document. Now if we do a document walkthrough, let's go back to page 1. If you take a look at page 1, under the student learning goal, you'll see a subheading called planned activities. Under planned activities, there are 3 columns. There's the action that will be taken, then that's followed by the supports and resources that will be provided by the schools or the district, followed by the benchmark. And there are 3 kinds of benchmarks. There's the frequency, process, and outcome. And so we are supposed to, as we go through this educator plan process, identify what those benchmarks are. And then it's followed by samples of evidence that will be collected in order to show that these benchmarks have been achieved. Now, all of the components together comprise what is considered to be a SMART goal. And I'll just review what that means. S is specific and strategic, M is measurable, A is action-oriented, R stands for rigorous, realistic, and results-focused, and T stands for timed and tracked. So, if you take a look at the student learning goal, you'll see there are 2 actions. They're on pages 1 and 2. And what has been outlined will be, what is on these pages, are the supports, the resources, and the benchmarks. So what I've done is I've outlined the actions that I think, as a superintendent, I will engage in with our principals to move us closer toward improvement in the area of mathematics. You may recall when I shared my self-assessment with you on March 11th, I talked about focusing on mathematics as a result of a 5-year trend analysis of data collected through MCAS and the student growth percentile. So then if you look at page 3, you'll see there are the details include 2 actions included under the professional practice goal. So it's talking about conducting monthly visits to observe mathematics with principals, and then engaging in calibration exercises to improve our observation ratings between the superintendent and the principal over time. And then if you take a look at pages 4 through 7, each of the district goals include 2 actions with supporting details for each of the 3 district goals. And on page 7, you'll see that there's a signature page. If this is something that the committee agrees to, then the superintendent signs this page along with the chair of the school committee. Now, there is an awful lot of information in this document to absorb in one evening, so whatever the pleasure of the chair is to move this forward.
I think I'd like to give us a chance to review it. And then the one thing I like about this, though, is I love conforming, and I love putting everybody into the same categories. That's the way I like about this whole process that the state's imposes. Because we've done so poorly in the past here, I think it's really important that we get our evaluations in order. Sarcasm.
I just want to say that this educator plan format is the format that has been proposed by the Department of Education. I feel that before I can ask the teachers to use this, I need to go through it first. I did find the forms user-friendly. It did take a considerable amount of time to put it together, but it clearly lays out the pathway to be followed in order to engage in activities or actions that are considered to be growth actions to improve my performance, therefore the performance of the district.
I'll get to you in a second, Karen. I just want to say that the problem I have with all of this stuff is none of it is aimed at districts like North Reading. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem I have. And the other problem I have is I can guarantee you within 6 months or a year or maybe a little longer, you're going to start hearing, we don't have enough people to do all the paperwork that's required for this. And we're going to have to hire people to do things like this rather than focusing on hiring teachers and spending money on other things to educate our kids.
This is the effort required for one person.
Right, this is one person, not 250 people.
Right, and all of the observations that go into it.
Correct.
This is a nightmare.
Karen?
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm just wondering, I'm not sure of the requirement. I don't think there's a requirement for this to be measurable by outcome, but it seems like for the first goal, at least, I'd like to understand what the increase by what would be. Because I think you might have your own ideas about what increase would be acceptable to you personally as a professional and what you'd really like to see. So if it's 1% and great, that counts, check the box, versus what actual percentage you like to see, and if there are subgroups here that are of interest to you that are driving the differences, in not succeeding in math. If there's a particular group in the MCAS rubric that you think would be interesting to look at, that you are vested in, and that's important to you. I might want to see it in here.
Yes. We have, in NRPS 2016, at the back,
Right.
It talks about the metrics that are used to determine whether or not we're making improvements. So all of those 3 major strategy areas are being measured as successful through the median SGP, or the student growth percentile. So what we did was, we needed to project out to 2016-17
Right.
what those incremental improvements need to be in order to show progress. So I have that document that I can share with you, so you can see the incremental progress over time.
I'm just saying, specify it here. I know that's how we do it, but I would like to be sure that I understand what success looks like to you in this
Sure.
document. It would help me figure it out versus sort of, did you do all this stuff? Great. I'm sure you're going to do everything, but what does improvement look like, and what would professional success be for you? It would be helpful for me to understand that a little bit better. I'm not saying what that goal should be, but what you're trying to achieve is not just changes in process, it's actually achievement and improvement or enhancement, one or the other, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question on the district goal where you talk about year 3 of NRPS 2016.
Yes.
And will be supported and implemented by June 2014. If the budget items are cut out of the budget for next year, will that have an impact on you being able to implement NRPS 2016?
Well, again, if you take a look at the first benchmark, by May of this year, the strategic goal subcommittees, we have subcommittees for each of the major strategy areas, will go back, as we did mid-year, and assess our progress toward meeting our goals. And then based on what we were able to accomplish or not accomplish, we will adjust the next year in NRPS 2016.
So who are the strategic goal subcommittees? Is that on the school committee?
No, they are members of the administrative council and leadership team.
Okay.
So they were all responsible for developing all of the initiatives over the 5 years in the plan.
And don't get me wrong, I think all this stuff is important. I think people need to be evaluated. I just don't think everybody should be evaluated by the same exact process. I guess that's my issue. I think we had a really good evaluation process in this town, and even with the teachers, we had a really solid evaluation program that we used. And now we're reinventing, or we're reinventing the whatever, the something, the process. We're rewriting the book, the rules. So. Anyway, I think if we take this home, we read it, we should discuss, bring it in next meeting, if anybody has any questions.
That'll be great.
And then we can just bring them to Kathy's attention at that time. And if not, and then can you refresh us next time in terms of what the schedule is for
Yes.
this moving forward?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'll put on the April 22nd agenda.
Yeah. Geez, I think after tonight, Jerry, I might be thrown out of the Democratic Party.
You were already
Wow.
thrown out,
You're
you just
working
didn't
on it.
choose to accept the letter.
But we're welcoming over here.
The other side wants me. Okay. Bills and payroll, we don't have those. I don't know if we have to put those on anymore, do we?
We're close to being able to eliminate it, I think.
Yes. I just need to make sure everyone, remember, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, for those of you who are email savvy, we'll be getting, I'm not pointing at anybody, Jerry, we'll be getting the emails and asking us to electronically sign the warrants. I think last week went pretty smoothly.
A few hiccups along the way, but thank you for that reminder.
And tomorrow they'll be out tomorrow, right? Around
Yes.
2:30. Okay.
Carl, sometimes I get them on non-Tuesday days. On my day's Tuesday, and I got one today, and I got one on Friday, so I don't know what's happening. Am I supposed to sign them?
Well, you might be
Let me
getting a
talk to you.
confirmation.
Those were reminders. Let me talk to you after the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Sometimes you also, too, will get a confirmation after you sign them, but it doesn't it's not really clear that it's confirmation.
Yeah,
It says
that's-
DocuSign again,
And
and
but
so.
it actually says sign, and then it actually allows me to sign.
Oh, really?
So I wonder if it just didn't accept it.
Oh, okay.
We can talk about it.
All right, thank you. Minutes, I don't think we have any this week, right?
No.
Budget update, nothing, Carl, for this week?
Nothing, thank you.
Budget. Staffing,
None at this time.
bids and donations,
None at this time.
subcommittee updates.
We did them.
We did them, right?
Well, essentially, it was part of the committee.
Administrative report.
Yes. I handed out to you an administrative report with a couple of items included in that report. If I could put my hands on it, that would be a good thing. Here we go. So in the report, there are 3 items. The first item that you will see that was attached to the cover page has to do with the MASC letter. The annual Day on the Hill program will not take place this year. MASC is replacing that day with a special advocacy initiative that has been scheduled for May 21st at the State House. So more, I think information is being mailed to your homes about this different initiative. And you can see in the letter that's attached to the cover sheet, they give several reasons as to why they're not able to hold Day on the Hill this year. So, you know, take a look at that. I also included for you the announcement of the new North Shore Education Consortium Executive Director. Ms. Francine Rosenberg has been named as the next Executive Director for the North Shore Education Consortium. So she is in contract negotiations at this time. We did go through an extensive interview process. I did participate. We had very strong candidates, and I'm very pleased with the selection of the new Executive Director. And then finally, what you also received as an attachment is the SEAM Collaborative's annual report under Chapter 43 of the Acts of 2012. Collaboratives are now required to submit an annual report to the Commissioner, to each member of the school committee, and to each member of a charter school board. So a copy of this is attached for your review. And the annual report goes into all kinds of information, very interesting information about the collaborative. Programs and services information. There are 7 programs that SEAM sponsors, along with district-based services. And then finally, it offers the FY12 financial information. So it's a very good document. It was very well done. The Board of Directors applauded Executive Director Kathy Lawson's work on this annual report.
I know this wasn't on your administrative report, but is there any update on the Director of Finance and Operations process? Are we interviewing candidates now?
Thank you. Yes, we begin interviews tomorrow. We are interviewing 8 candidates. I think I already mentioned we had 35 applicants for the position. We are interviewing 8 starting tomorrow, so we'll be interviewing on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Then we're hoping, we intend to deliberate Thursday evening and move finalists forward for reference checks, for additional interviews with the Administrative Council on April 10th, and then to come before you at a separate meeting on Tuesday, April 23rd. You had approved that date at an earlier time. What I need to know from you is what time would you like to start those interviews on that evening? It's a Tuesday night.
3 or 2, you said?
2 to 3, so I would say plan for 3, and if we only have 2, so be it. And I need to know about how long you would like those interviews with you to be.
I'm thinking I'd probably allocate a half an hour for each one.
For each person?
30 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
With
What
like
time
a
would you like to
5-minute
start?
I'd say a 5-minute break in between each one,
Yeah.
so.
Start around, can we start at 6, or is that too early for you guys? Probably too early, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
6:30.
6:30?
6:30?
Michael, would that work?
We'll
6:30?
try.
Okay.
6:30, and so we should be done by 8:30 at the latest.
Yes, and this will be posted. We will, because it will be a meeting. We'll open as a meeting. So we'll post this as a meeting as well. So we have a school committee meeting on the 22nd, and then we have interviews on the 23rd. Okay? So start at 6:30. I will take care of that.
Okay. Any correspondence?
None. Thank you.
Future business, we have our next meeting is April 22nd. Then we will be interviewing candidates for the Director of Finance and Finance Operations on the 23rd, and then we have a meeting on the 29th.
That's
On the
correct.
29th, we will be voting on the budget. Also, April 11th, we are meeting with the Finance Committee. That's not a required meeting. If anybody can make that, I believe that's at
15.
7:15?
7:15.
That's April 11th.
At Town
Finance
Hall.
Committee. And what is the April 25th, the community, you want to mention the Community Impact Team
Oh,
meeting?
yes. Before I did that, I just wanted to make sure that the committee knows that April 22nd, we are meeting at the Hood School. So
Okay.
it is the Hood School presentation that evening. On April 29th, the Community Impact Team will have its first annual breakfast meeting for the community, and it will be held at the Flint Memorial Library Activity Room. Breakfast will be served. It's a breakfast meeting. It will be an opportunity for members of the community to hear about the accomplishments of each of the action teams that are subcommittees of the Community Impact Team, and ask any questions that you may have of us. It also is an opportunity for Chief Murphy to talk about all of the accomplishments that we've experienced over the last year and what the plans are for the future.
Okay. Any other items? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Good night.